What's up everyone, I'm Jake the Ashen Hollow. Okay, so the first thing you may have noticed is that I gave this video a part 1 title. And that is because I more than definitely plan on doing a lot more with this topic. And this will be a rather unique video compared to my others at least, and the reason why is the same reason I want there to be a part 2 and maybe even a part 3. The reason being is we seemingly have a lot of information about the Profaned Flame and the Profaned Capital, while simultaneously we don't, if that makes any sense. Like, we can learn a great deal and we can pinpoint certain parties' involvements, it's just very difficult to connect all of these dots at this point in time. Which is why I want a part 2 to cover more of this topic when I either discover something new, or hopefully a DLC will reveal more to us, because the Profaned Flame is a big deal, an even bigger part of the story than I originally thought. So this video won't be like my other videos in the sense that I give you my speculation of the story and then say, and that's what I think happened, the end, because there's not an end to this theory or story yet. So I will go about my normal routine of bringing you my speculations and things that led me to those conclusions, and as for the gaps in the story, I will show you where these pop up and who, what, or where I think they reference. And again, of course, my speculation on it. So this is in no way a finished speculation, theory, or story, and I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts and speculations in the comments of this video, more so than any of my other videos, because this is one of the most open-ended stories I've encountered so far. So let's get right into it. Okay, so first let's talk Flame of Chaos. We know the Witch of Izalith created the Flame of Chaos when she attempted to use her Lord Soul to duplicate the first flame, and she eventually lost control over it, which then birthed demons and fire, engulfed the witch, and it was just overall a pretty bad time. Again, we see another version of the Flame of Chaos in Eliam Lois. Finally, we have the Profaned Flame, which I believe is just yet another version of the Flame of Chaos. So we don't really know too much about when the Profaned Flame appeared or why, but we do slightly know how. If we read the description on Eleonora, it says, "The Profaned Flame was triggered by the curse of these women, relatives of a certain oracle, but despite their culpability they went on living without any cares." Now, I mentioned this in my last video about the Sable Church of Londor, and it has really gotten me thinking lately. So I was thinking about these women, which it seems to likely be referring to the sisters who founded the Sable Church of Londor. Now, whether you believe them to be the remaining Chaos Witches, or believe Velka to be one of them, or just believe them to serve Velka, that isn't too important, at least for right now. So we know that regardless of her role, Velka is heavily tied to the Black Church. I think we can at least all agree on that. What makes Eleonora curious to me is that upon trading it to the crows Pickle Pea and Pumparum, we receive a hollow gem, which we know is a stone plentiful in Londor, Land of Hollows. We also find the axe after we killed a monstrosity of sin, Velka being the goddess of, well, sin, and I believe there to be a reason all these things want to point us towards the Sable Church. I believe that is because these women Eleanor is referencing are the sisters of the church. So then we learn that these women are relatives to a certain oracle, which made me very curious, since, well, the only oracle we know of in the game is Alsana, who is a fragment of Manus. So we never learn who the Witch of Izalith was intimate with. We never learn of the father of the Daughters of Chaos. The thing I found most curious of Eleonora is that it used the word relatives. Dark Souls has never shied away from words like mother, brother, sister, father, so it seemed curious to me that it would use such a broad word, relatives. So two theories popped in my head. One, I had to follow my trend of wanting these sisters of the church to be unaccounted for Chaos Witches, which, if that were the case, it wouldn't be so far off to think that before Manus was completely tainted, when he was human, he could have fathered the Daughters of Chaos. That would in turn make Alsana somewhat of a relative to them, in the sense of the word. The other theory I thought is a lot less complicated, and that is just that the Sisters of the Black Church are also fragments of Manus, which when I think about it definitely makes more sense than my prior theory. I've just always loved the Izalith story arc and always wanted to see Chaos Witches again, so you can't really blame me for trying to keep the dream alive. But this is what Dark Souls is about anyways, and we'll touch on the Chaos Witches topic later. So now we know the Profaned Flame was triggered by a curse, and that it is most likely a curse from the women founding the Sable Church, and for the sake of this video, we'll just keep referring to them as such. But we don't really know why. Well, one thing we do know is the intentions behind Koth and the Black Church. Those intentions are to find the Lord of Hollows and have them usurp the flame from its mantle, putting an end to the linking of the fire, and to usher in the true age of man, or the true age of dark. It isn't really clear how the Profaned Flame could help them achieve that goal, but let's go ahead and look at some of the things that took place. If we read the Profaned Greatsword, it says, "A ceremonial sword held in Pontiff Sulyvahn's right hand representing the Profaned Flame. Long ago, when Sulyvahn was yet a young sorcerer, he discovered the profaned capital and an unending flame below a distant tundra of Irithyll, and a burning ambition took root within him." So this is what I think could have happened. I think that Koth manipulated Sulyvahn into finding the Profaned Flame, similar to how he manipulated the people of Ulasil into digging up Manus. Though again, it isn't clear on why, it is just important to link Pontiff Sulyvahn to this story. But I think Sulyvahn was smarter than Koth gave him credit, for he found a way to use the flame to his advantage, and if we read the Immolation Tinder, it says, "Profane flame wielded by the Irithyllian witches, frigid spirits roaming the boreal valley." As well, if we look at the Fire Witch's helmet, it reads, "Helm of the witches who bore the profaned flame, now harrowed spirits of Irithyll." The witches who lead the Pontiff Knights were originally ordained as holy knights. It was not long, however, before their hearts were swallowed by the profaned flame. So not only could the Pontiff manipulate this flame for himself, he also extracted its power to his knights, though they were eventually swallowed by it themselves, as I think we can assume the same happened to Sulyvahn. I would also like to quickly note that we can summon a pale Londor shade if we're following the Lord of Hollows questline for the Pontiff Sulyvahn boss fight, which could just be a result of a salty Koth wanting the Pontiff dead. It's not super important, but it does help link it into our story. One common theory about Sulyvahn is that he was previously the mentor to Prince Lothric. If we read the Sorcery Soul Stream, it says, "Sorcery imparted by the first of the scholars when Lothric and the Grand Archives were but young. The first of the scholars doubted the linking of the fire, and was alleged to be a private mentor to the royal prince." If we believe this scholar to have been Sulyvahn, it isn't too absurd to think he doubted linking the fire based on what Koth would have him believe. If we go back to Dark Souls 1, we can hear Koth say,
"And soon the flames did fade, and only dark remained. Thus began the age of men, the age of dark. However, Lord Gwyn trembled at the dark, clinging to his age of fire, and in dire fear of humans, and the Dark Lord who would one day be born amongst them. Lord Gwyn resisted the course of nature by sacrificing himself to link the fire, and commanding his children to shepherd the humans. Gwyn has blurred your past to prevent the birth of the Dark Lord. I am the primordial serpent. I seek to right the wrongs of the past, to discover our true Lord."
So it seems his intentions have not wavered, but now it's referred to Lord of Hollows instead of Dark Lord. So it could seem likely that Koth would use the lure of the Profaned Flame to manipulate the mentor of the prince who is destined to link the flame, exactly the opposite of what Koth wants. Again, that's just what I think could have happened. One thing I would also like to point out is that the Grand Archives are ran by the Scholars, which the Scholar is one of the 3 pillars of Lothric, but that's a completely different conversation. Anyways, it seems likely that the Crystal Sage is the current head figure of the Archives. If we read the Sage's big hat, it says, "Enormous hat that completely obscures the face, belonged to twin gurus known as the Crystal Sages. The pair are said to be successors of the great sage Logan, and this big hat is a symbol of their pedigree." So we established that the Crystal Sage that seems to be the current head figure of the Grand Archives are successors of Big Hat Logan, which likely means they studied under him. What is also curious is if we look at the sage's big hat, we can see a mask designed to look like some bird-like skull, which I found curious because of Velka's connection to crows. So that could be something pointing to some kind of involvement, or they could have just thought it looked cool, because who doesn't want to rock a plague doctor mask, right? So I don't want to talk too much about Big Hat Logan right now, but I will mention one more reference to him. In the Profaned capital, we find an NPC known as the Unkindled Apprentice. If we read the description of the robe he wears, it says, "Robe worn by court sorcerers of the Profaned capital." The formal gold stitching suggests they may have also been oracles. There are many sorcerers who claim heirship to the great sage Big Hat Logan, and the Profaned capital houses one of 2 leading schools. There are a couple things here. They claim heirship to the great sage Logan, and it is also suggested that they may have once been oracles, or may have been oracles, which slightly confused me for a bit because Eleanor references that the sisters of the Sable Church are relatives of a certain oracle. But after thinking a bit, I shrugged this reference off, and for 2 reasons. 1, it says may have been an oracle, and 2, Eleanor reference is about a certain oracle, not a group of sorcerers who may have been oracles. But here we find Logan's name again, in the mix of things that are connecting to the Profaned capital. I'm not suggesting he did or didn't have any kind of involvement in the Profaned Flame, but I just wanted to point out we keep seeing his name pop up. In fact, upon killing the Unkindled Apprentice, we received Logan's scroll, and reading a description of the spell Homing Soul Mass we can get from the scroll, it says, "Sorcery developed by Big Hat Logan, the great sorcerer who left the Dragon School in an age long past. This sorcery may offer a clue as to what Logan sought, but further investigation suggests its attraction to living things mirrors the nature of the dark." So it may offer a clue to what Logan sought, and it mirrors the nature of the dark. That is curious to me, especially since we keep seeing Logan's name pop up while investigating the Profaned Flame and Capital. Again, I don't want to suggest he did or didn't have anything to do with it. There simply isn't enough solid evidence to say one way or another. I just want you to make a special note of that because it certainly does seem important. Okay, so let's jump to the events of when the Profaned Flame really took its toll. So let's read the Cinder of a Lord that belonged to Yhorm the Giant, which says, "Lonely Yhorm became a Lord of Cinder to put the Profaned Flame to rest, knowing full well that those who spoke of him as Lord were quite insincere." Alright, so he linked the flame in order to put the flame to rest. That isn't too much to go on. Questions I have are, who told Yhorm that the linking of the flame would put the Profaned Flame to rest, and why did they tell him this? Now let's look at what did happen when Yhorm attempted to put the Profaned Flame to rest. When we read the Pyromancy Profaned Flame, it says, "Pyromancy deriving from the Profaned Flame. The Profaned capital was consumed by fire after Yhorm the Giant became a Lord of Cinder. The fire, born of the sky, is said to have incinerated naught but human flesh." So instead of putting the flame to rest, it sounds more like Yhorm set off a bomb, which makes me think he was manipulated into thinking that becoming a Lord of Cinder would put the flame to rest. Or maybe it was the people who asked Yhorm to lead them that were manipulated into getting him to link the fire. Either way, it seems like the whole thing was some kind of trick, which has Koth written all over it to me. And with Koth comes the Black Church, which we already know the sisters were referenced to have triggered the curse of the Profaned Flame. If that isn't proof enough for you, then let's look at the Profaned Coal, which says, "Remnants of the fire that burned down the Profaned capital preserved in an icy skull." Also, preserved in an icy skull. I don't know if that's some sort of shout out to Guillaume Langlois or not. I'm not really sure what to think of that specifically. I just wanted to give you more to ponder on. Okay, so pop quiz, class. Tell me what this means. No, I'm just kidding. It's not a quiz, it's a test. Anyways, okay, let's listen to what Andre has to say when we give him this coal.
Words. Where did you have them?
You see the abyss in it? How curious. Okay, so now back to the Chaos Witches that I just love to talk about. And I will find a way to breathe life back into these gals. If I have to prove that Havel himself is a Chaos Witch, I will. No, I'm kidding. I just want you to know how far I'm willing to go. So back to the Grand Archives again. Here we can find a whip, the Witch's Locks, which says, a whip fashioned from the black hair of a daughter of the Witch of Izalith, creator of the Flame of Chaos. The long, shiny locks woven together to create this whip are imbued with the essence of fire, which can be channeled through the use of its skill. And the skill Flame Whip says, temporarily coat the whip in fire, the self-same fire as that which consumed the witch herself, it is said. That was kind of a tongue twister. Anyway, I read the description of this skill specifically so that we'd know that the whip is coated in the same fire that consumed the witch, which is the same fire from Guillaume Langlois and presumably the same fire from the Profaned Flame. That, along with the ties the Grand Archive is having towards the Profaned Flame, it is just curious to me that we come upon a weapon as specific as this here. I don't have too much to go on about it, it's just something else I want you to take note of. One last thing about the Grand Archives is that in both the Archives and the Profaned Capital is where we find the gargoyle enemies, which, if we read one of their weapons, it says, Stone Torch Hammer wielded by gargoyles of the Profaned Capital. The Profaned Flame, which never goes out, imbues this weapon with a fire attack. So the gargoyles are certainly from the Profaned Capital, and their weapons are imbued with the Profaned Flame. That is just yet another thing I found curious about the Archive's connection to the Capital, and why these gargoyles are here. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story arc and what you think is going on with it. I think the whole thing was some kind of huge manipulation from Koth and the Black Church. Perhaps they thought if they triggered the curse, it could potentially destroy the First Flame itself, or incinerate everyone with hopes of linking the flame thereafter. Or perhaps make people think that the consequence for continuing to link the flame would be the air lit on fire again and hell raining down from above and killing all kinds of people. But of that I'm not sure. But it seems that Koth and the Sable Church were certainly behind it. We know what their motives are in the current point in the game, so at some point it would have been done in some effort to realize that same goal. Okay, so I know this episode did a bit of jumping around. I just wanted to bring your attention to the vastness of the story behind the Profaned Flame, and see how its influence has reached around so many different places and characters of this game. I know some of it may have been confusing, and you may or may not agree with some of the speculations I've made about it thus far, so I just wanted to kind of get a baseline going from the story, because there's still a lot to uncover, and there's even more we don't know about it yet. So I still hope to discover more, either through things I may have skipped and not noticed, or perhaps they will cover it more in the DLC. So thank you for watching, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy it, please consider liking, and if you haven't subscribed, you're missing out on one awesome ass click of the mouse, my friend. But thanks again, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.